शङ्खचक्रधर सर्वेशा जनार्दन जगन्नाथ शङ्खचक्रधर सर्वेशा श्रितजनपाल श्रीनिवास श्रितजनपाल श्रीनिवास कलियुगवरद श्रीवेङ्कटेश श्रीधरा केशव श्रीधरा केशव श्रीकर शुभकर ऋषिकेश जनार्दन जगन्नाथ शङ्खचक्रधर सर्वेश अगणित गुणगण अनन्तरूपा आनन्दामृत अमित प्रताप श्रीधरा केशव श्रीकर शुभकर ऋषिकेश जनार्दन जगन्नाथ शङ्खचक्रधर
सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ नमो भगवते वैवस्वताय मृत्यवे ब्रह्मविद्याचार्याय नचिकेतसे च Humble prostrations to one and all. So in the last class, we were discussing the chariot metaphor. The chariot is the body. The owner of the chariot is the Jivatma. The charioteer is the intellect. The reins are the mind. The horses are the sense organs, and the path, they are the sense objects. So this relationship was given, the connection was given, how this mind, intellect, sense organs are connected. So it is said, if the intellect is unintelligent, is devoid of right knowledge, then that intellect will not be able to control the mind. The mind will become ayukta, non-integrated, non-united, non-cooperating. So such a non-cooperating mind will only cooperate with the senses and the senses will go and indulge in the sense objects. So such sense organs will become like dushta ashva, wicked horses. It will only destroy the traveler, the chariot, etc. So here the importance of the charioteer, the importance of the knowledge of the charioteer is mentioned. The most important role is the role of the charioteer, and he must be a knowledgeable charioteer. In the same way, in life the most important aspect is the knowledge in our intellect. Right knowledge about living is the most important thing. Everything in our life is determined by the knowledge we possess about life. The way we think, the way we speak, the way we behave, the way we act, the goal we keep in our mind, the time we spend, the place where we spend our time, everything is determined by the knowledge about living. So if you have the right knowledge, then fine, you will reach the destination, which is moksha, liberation. But if the knowledge is wrong, then the entire life will be wasted. So the most important aspect in our life is knowledge. So this is what is mentioned here. So what happens to a knowledgeable person, Vijnanavan? So now the destination is pointed out in verse number 7 and 8. Let us chant those verses. Page number 158, verse number 7. Yastva vijnanavan bhavati amanaska sada ashuchi na satat padamapnoti samsāram chādhigacchati. Yastva vijnanavan bhavati amanaska sada ashuchi na satat padamapnoti samsāram chādhigacchati. Page number 161, verse number 8. Yastu vijnanavan bhavati sa-manaska sada ashuchi satu tat padamapnoti yasmad bhuyo na jayate. Yastu vijnanavan bhavati sa-manaska sada ashuchi satu tat padamapnoti yasmad bhuyo na jayate. So again we find Vijnanavan, Avijnanavan. Comparison is given. So yastu avijnanavan bhavati, that person who is avijnanavan, who has no right knowledge, whose intellect is not educated in the right knowledge, whose intellect has no right knowledge, an ignorant intellect, what happens to him? Amanaskaha. He will not have his mind with him. Amanaskaha. Ashuchihi. His intellect, his mind, his senses, all of them, his lifestyle, everything will be impure. He is a man of impurity, ashuchihi. When? Sada, all the time. So what happens to such a person? Nasa tat padam apnoti. He will never attain that state, that supreme state. He will never attain. then what happens to him? Samsāram cha adhigacchati. He attains, adhigacchati. He attains what? Samsāra. He comes back again and again to this samsara. Repeated birth-death cycle is his lot. But what about the other person? Yastu vijñānavan bhavati. But the other one who has the right knowledge, who is well directed by his knowledge in the intellect. What happens to him? Sa-manaska. He is not a-manaska, he is sa-manaska. His intellect is with his mind. The mind is ever with the intellect. Sa-manaska. And sada shuchihi. His lifestyle is pure. Everything regarding him is pure. And this is always the case. Sada. What happens to such a person? Satu tat padam apnoti. Such a person will definitely reach that supreme state. Yasmad bhuyah na jayate. After having which there is no rebirth. Bhuyah, again, na jayate. He is not born. He is not born again. So this comparison is made again. So, yastu avijñānavan bhavati, the person without right knowledge, he is born again and again. He never reaches that ultimate state, that destination called Paramatma. He never reaches that. He comes back again and again to this world and goes through experiences in different bodies, in different worlds. But as far as a knowledgeable person is concerned, he attains that higher state and he becomes free from birth-death cycle. This is what is mentioned. So this verse appear to be similar to the previous two verses. The last two verses also started the same way. Yastu avijñānavan bhavati, yastu vijñānavan bhavati, similar way. So here, earlier the mind was described yuktaha ayuktaha. Here the term used for mind is amanaska sa-manaska. Actually the meaning is the same. So as far as a person with right knowledge is concerned, so yes, last class we were seeing intellect with its right knowledge will inspire the mind to experience Atmananda, the real Ananda, the pure Ananda, the absolute Ananda, the unconditional Ananda. Sometimes it is called Shivananda, the most auspicious bliss, infinite bliss, unconditional bliss, fulfilling bliss. So this is the bliss which is the nature of the self. But to gain that self, we must have right knowledge. We have to do jnana tapas, the austerity of knowledge. It has to be done. Mind has to be purified, senses have to be disciplined, right knowledge has to be gained through shravanam, mananam, nididhyasanam, through listening, through contemplation, through meditation. Effort is involved. With the right effort, that intellect gains the right knowledge. So such an intellect, knowledgeable intellect, is a strong intellect and it will direct the attention of the mind towards the self. That strength to direct the attention of the mind towards the self, that strength comes from knowledge. Knowledge alone is the strength. The clarity of the intellect, the conviction of the intellect in this knowledge itself is the strength of the intellect. So with the strength of this intellect is able to divert the attention of the mind from the sense pleasures. Now the intellect is stronger, so therefore it is able to divert the attention of the mind from the senses towards the self. The intellect is able to convince the mind that you will get higher happiness only in the self, and I will make you experience that happiness. So with this promise, the intellect brings back the attention of the mind to the self. And when the mind experiences that bliss of the self, the mind experiences Atmananda and not Vishayananda. Till then, the mind was experiencing only the Vishayananda, the pleasure of the senses, the sensuous pleasures. So now the mind understands that this bliss of the self is much higher than the sensuous pleasures. It has got the direct experience of it. So such a mind, after having experienced the higher joy of the self, so naturally such a mind will leave the lower pleasures of the senses. So now what will the mind do? The mind will become sa-manaska. Sa-manaska means a mind which is always with the intellect. Sa means with, along with. So that prefix sa means along with. Just like Bhagavan Sri Ramchandra Ji said, sa-shara-chapa, sa-shara-chapa means what? The one who is along with shara and chapa, bow and arrow. So sa means along with. So the mind which is always with the intellect is called sa-manaska. Because now the mind has understood, if I want happiness, there is only one way, I have to be with the intellect. If I am in union with the intellect, I will always be happy. And this happiness is a real happiness, absolute happiness, original happiness, unconditional happiness, pure happiness. It has no defects. It is perfect. So therefore that mind ever remains with the intellect. That's why the term sa-manaska is used. Also, when we use the term sa, it has another meaning also. Sa always means good. So for example, when we say sa-hridaya, a person who is a sa-hridaya means a good-hearted person. So sometimes that meaning also comes. When we add this prefix sa, it also means good. So what does it mean? Sa-manaska means such a mind becomes a good mind. Such a mind becomes a pure mind, a cheerful mind, a healthy mind. So that meaning also comes. Sa-manaska, good mind, cheerful mind. And also shuchihi. Shuchihi means pure. So everything regarding that person is pure. So such a person who has the spiritual knowledge, whose intellect is strong, for such a person, everything is auspicious, everything is pure. Shuchi means pure. So his thoughts are pure, his speech is pure, his actions are pure, his intentions are pure, his behavior is noble, good, pure. Everything regarding him is pure. Sada, always. See, always. So his senses are also pure. The senses involve only in good things of the world. The senses always expose itself to sat-sang. So therefore senses are pure. So naturally, because you expose yourself to only good things of the world, your mind is also pure. And because you are constantly exposing yourself to spiritual knowledge, you read only scriptures, only good things you expose yourself to. So the mind is pure, the intellect is pure, the thinking is pure, everything is pure and noble. So such a person experiences a pure bliss also. The happiness also has purity and impurity. The happiness gained from the senses is an impure happiness. The happiness gained from right knowledge from the self is a pure happiness. So everything is pure. It is something like when you take healthy, nourishing food. So your body remains healthy, isn't it? In the same way that the thoughts are healthy, the mind is healthy, the intellect is healthy, everything is healthy. Such a person experiences a clean conscience. Now, this is another advantage. The mind is very light, the mind is cheerful, mind is happy, mind is peaceful, mind is quiet. So when we use this term shuchi, all these meanings, they come. You love to be in that state. So actually speaking, this is heaven. When you have such a wonderful mind, a cheerful mind, happy mind, peaceful, quiet mind, the experience of heaven means actually this. Sa-manaska. Now what happens to such a person? Satu tat padam apnoti. Such a person with such a quiet, peaceful, cheerful mind, such a person with such disciplined senses, such a person with enlightened intellect, for him this path is a cakewalk. Effortlessly he reaches that supreme state. Effortlessly he experiences that state of Paramatma. So for such a Jivatma who has disciplined his senses, purified his mind, enlightened his intellect, for him attaining Paramatma is very, very easy. Satu tat padam apnoti. He will definitely reach that state. Yasmat bhuyo na jayate. From where there is no rebirth. So his traveling comes to an end. So as we have discussed earlier, this is a travel. Jivatma is traveling towards Paramatma. This travel involves traveling from darkness to light. Traveling from ignorance to knowledge, traveling from misery to happiness. So this travel comes to an end once he reaches the ultimate goal, the ultimate state, the state of Paramatma. That is called as Tat Padam, that state. Yasmad bhuyo na jayate. Then he is not born again. But what about the other person? A-manaska sada ashuchi. What about him? So here the term is a-manaska. A-manaska means just the opposite of sa-manaska. It is a-manaska. A means what? A mind which is never cooperating with the intellect. A mind which never listens to the intellect. A mind which persuades the intellect in its own ways, in its own crooked, wicked, vicious ways. Please remember, intellect alone has to take decision. Mind has no right to take decision. So what will such a mind do? It will not listen to the intellect, rather it will make the intellect listen to it. So it will force the intellect to take decisions based on the crooked, wicked ways. So such a mind is called a-manaska, a non-cooperating mind, a non-united mind, an indisciplined mind, a vicious mind. Such a mind is called a-manaska. So such a mind is always sada ashuchi, it's always impure. So the life of that person also will be full of impurity. What do you mean impurity here? There is always this guilt feeling, there is always this conscience prick. Now this is one kind of impurity. You do something and there is always a guilt. Deep down you know that what you have done is wrong. So guilt feeling is always there. And in that person's life also there is always too much of indulgence in the senses. Sensual indulgences are there. There is compromise with all kinds of values of life. And so what will be the kind of state of mind he will have? So here it is said amanaska. Amanaska means what? A mind full of kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. Lust, anger, delusion, greed, jealousy. Full of ragadvesha, likes and dislikes. Full of ahankara, mamakara, I-ness and minus. So this will be the kind of mind he will possess. Now this is called as amanaska and sada ashuchi, impure. So such a person will always be a slave of his senses, and therefore the mind will be a slave of the senses. So the mind is a slave, senses are a slave, therefore he also is a slave. Intellect is a slave of the senses. Intellect just follows the mind and the senses. Indriyanam hi charatam yanmanun vidhiyate tadasya harati prajna vayurnavam iva ambhasi. Bhagavad Gita says. A boat, if it is not anchored properly, what happens to that boat? So when the wind blows, it carries away that boat in the water. So here the anchor is the intellect, the boat is the mind, and the wind is the senses. So as far as a knowledgeable person is concerned, his anchor is a firm anchor. And because the anchor is firm, the boat cannot move. The boat remains even when the wind blows. His mind is ever anchored to his intellect. But what about this person? His anchor is weak. It is an unanchored boat because intellect is not strong at all. It is weak. Intellect is weak because there is no right knowledge. No sadhana has been done. No tapas has been done. No scriptural study has been done. No shravana manana has been done. So naturally the intellect is weak. When that intellect is weak, it cannot prevent the mind from indulging in senses. Or rather, yesterday we have seen, if it is a tamasic intellect, then that intellect will only support the mind in indulgence, because the intellect is misguided in thinking that true happiness is the happiness of the senses. So such an intellect will only support the mind in sensual indulgence. So like a boat which is carried away in the water, anchorless boat is carried away by the blowing wind, his mind is also carried away. So such a mind which is carried away by the senses is called a-manaska. So such people, they indulge in sense pleasures shamelessly. Or even if they know that it is wrong, they are helpless, they will indulge in it shamelessly. Helplessly they will indulge, in spite of knowing that it is wrong. Recently, during the COVID lockdown, people who were addicted to drinks, they became so miserable because all these liquor shops were closed. And after so many days when it was open, you must see, I am sure you all know, there was a big queue in front of these liquor shops. Even women were standing in this queue. Something which we can't even think of some 10-20 years back. Women were standing to get liquor. And when this cameraman was shooting them, some news channel guy, so they were covering their face. Now why did they cover their face? That itself shows that they know that what they are doing is wrong. It is not something praiseworthy. Now this is what our indisciplined mind will force us to do. Even though we know that it is wrong, it will force us to do the wrong thing. We helplessly end up doing the wrong thing. So these are all the glories of this indisciplined mind. So such a person is a slave of the mind and the senses. So that is why these pleasures are called impure pleasures. It makes everything impure. Why is it that the life becomes impure when we become addicted to sense objects? Now see, it is something like this. The moment we become a slave of the sense objects, now see, in this world, sense objects are few, the desirers of those sense objects are many. So please understand, when I say sense object, everything comes: name, fame, power, position, possession, everything. So sense objects are few, desirers are many. If you want to be first in any field, that first can only be one, but the desirers of that first rank, they are many. So naturally what happens? There is competition, there is jealousy, there is hatred, there is revenge, there is bitterness, there is anger, there is enmity. Now see, all these negative things, why has it occupied the mind? These negative emotions have occupied because I desire something outside myself. I desire something of the world. So the moment I desire anything of this world, that very same moment everything becomes impure. That's why it's called ashuchi. The moment I become a slave of the sense objects, mind starts becoming impure. Now what happens when I become a slave of a sense object? The next thing also follows. I become a slave of wealth also. Because most of these sense objects can be purchased with wealth. This relationship I see. So then what happens? I become a slave of wealth. Very interestingly, if you want to experience Atmananda, there the wealth has no role to play. It is only when you want Vishayananda, wealth has a role to play. So a person who is seeking Atmananda, he will not give any importance to wealth. It is only the person who is seeking Vishayananda, he alone will value wealth. If you want more and more Vishayas, more and more sense objects, you will need more and more wealth. So naturally this person will start earning wealth through immoral ways, illegal ways, corrupt ways, unethical ways, unrighteous ways. You see, these are all called impurity, ashuchi. So they become Harshad Mehtas and Nirav Modis. Now, when you earn lot of wealth, what happens? There comes superiority complex, there comes arrogance, there comes pride. Now, this is the mother of all vices, arrogance. Once the ego takes root in us, all the vicious vices, they occupy our heart. And now once arrogance comes, stress, strain, worry, anxiety, fear naturally comes. The greater the ego, the greater the stress and strain. And what is the only way to get rid of this stress and strain? There is only one way: drink. That's why people are addicted to drinks. What is the psychology behind people getting addicted to drinks? Psychology is this: there is so much of stress and strain and restlessness and agitation, disturbance in the mind. The only way in which you can quieten such a disturbed mind, the only way to quieten such a disturbed mind is forcefully quieten the mind by using some intoxicants. Now remember, as far as the other person is concerned, who has the right knowledge, he quietens the mind through Atmananda. But that option is not available for these people because the mind is impure. So what is the only way to quieten the mind? Through unnatural way. The only way to quieten is take drugs, take drinks. And these drugs and drinks, they will forcefully quieten the mind. And such a quiet mind is a very addictive state of mind because everybody wants peace. So they think this is the way to attain peace of mind. It is true that when we take these drugs and drinks, the mind is quietened. The mind will be forcefully quietened. It is a kind of suppression. They suppress the mind to quietude. So then these people get addicted to that quietude and thus they become addicted to drugs and drinks. And then what happens? In the process, health is gone, wealth is gone, everything is gone. Thus they ruin their life. That's why it is called ashuchi. So why is it that they have ruined their life? They have ruined their life because they don't have the right knowledge about life. So who has to be blamed for ruining the life? There is only one aspect, one factor to be blamed, their own unintelligent intellect. So see how much important is knowledge. This knowledge regarding right living, how much important it is. That is why we must be truly grateful to Pujya Gurudev, Swami Chinmaya for having established this mission, Chinmaya mission, where the focus is upon the study of the scriptures, the focus is upon gaining knowledge. Kathopanishad is glorifying the charioteer, glorifying the intellect, glorifying the knowledge. So Pujya Gurudev has given us such a wonderful platform where we are exposed to this knowledge. And when we study the scriptures, we come to know the glory of this knowledge. And in our own life also we see that when we have this knowledge, how much our life is transformed. So humble prostrations with gratitude unto the lotus feet of Pujya Gurudev, who has given us this wonderful knowledge. Right. So, a person without knowledge, what happens to him? Nasatat padam apnoti. Such a person will never attain this state, the supreme state. And what happens to him? Samsāram cha adhigacchati. He comes back to the samsāra. Samsaranam is called samsāra. Continuous change, continuous traveling from one body to another, one experience to another, one world to another, and continuous travel. There is no end. Destination is never reached. So thus he suffers in every life. This is what happens when we ignore this knowledge. Now one more point we have to keep in mind here. Very many times we hear people, when they do this guided meditation, we sometimes hear the instructor giving such instructions. Imagine that the mind is peaceful. Sometimes we hear such instructions. Imagine that your mind is pure. Imagine that your mind is peaceful. Now this is the instruction given by the instructor to people who are guided in meditation. Now please understand, peace is not something which you can imagine and gain. This has to be very clearly understood. Peace of mind cannot be imagined and gained, because peace of mind is the effect Noble thoughts, noble deeds are the cause. So if I have to make my mind peaceful, what is the way? There is only one way. I have to live an intelligent life, ensuring my thoughts are pure, my actions are pure, my speech is pure. Only when I live a good, noble life, as a result of living a noble life, as a result of it, I experience peace. So peace is the end result of noble living. Peace is not something which we can imagine and get. So if you hear this instruction, imagine that your mind is peaceful, it is an absolutely impractical instruction. A person who has done all kinds of vulgar actions, criminal action, you ask him to be peaceful, it is just not possible. If peace can be gained just by imagination, what is the purpose of living a noble life then? You can just imagine and be peaceful. It is exactly like saying a hungry person, you just imagine that your stomach is full. You just imagine that your hunger is satiated. This is not something to be imagined. There is only one way in which your hunger can go, that is by eating food. You eat food and as an end result, your hunger vanishes. Isn't it? It is a byproduct. It is the end result. It is the end product. It is not something to be imagined. You can't get rid of your hunger through imagination. In the same way, you can never attain peace through imagination. Peace is the blessing of the Lord for our noble, righteous living. So that blessing has to come from the Lord. It is not something which we can imagine. So this point has to be clearly understood. Unless the mind is shuchihi, pure, unless the intellect is vijnanavan, unless the senses are disciplined, this peace will never come. And that is why the great people, noble people, they walk the path of righteousness. They know that there is only one way in which peace can be gained, that is by walking the path of righteousness, goodness, nobility. So therefore they never compromise with their values. There is a beautiful subhashitam which says, Nindantu niti nipunaha yadi vastuvantu Lakshmi samavishatu gacchatu va yatheshtam Adyaiva maranamastu yugantareva Nyayat patha pravichalanti padam nadhiraha. So what he said, Nindantu niti puna yadivastuvantu. So these great people, Nyayat patha pravichalanti padam nadhiraha. The wise people, the noble people, they are very courageous. They never deviate from Nyayat patha, the path of righteousness, goodness. They never deviate from that path. Whatever be the obstruction, Nindantu niti nipunaha yadivastuvantu. People may criticize them, praise them, it doesn't matter. Lakshmi samavishatu gacchatu va yatheshtam. Wealth may come or go, it doesn't matter. Adyaiva maranamastu yugantareva. Death may come right now or it may come after so many yugas, it doesn't matter. So death doesn't matter to them, wealth doesn't matter to them, honor, dishonor doesn't matter to them. They never compromise with the values, they keep on walking the righteous path. Because they know there is only one way to peace, and that is by noble living, righteous living. So they never compromise with the higher values of life. How many of our freedom fighters, they accepted death. They went smilingly to the gallows. Why did they do that? Because they know peaceful death is far better than miserable life. They know that if we compromise with our values, yes, we may be living, we can escape death, but what kind of life it will be? That life will be full of conscience prick. So that life will be a miserable life. So far better is to walk towards death. One thing is for sure, your mind will be peaceful because you have not compromised. Right. Now, in verse number 7 and 8, the term used is nasa tatpadam apnoti, satu tatpadam apnoti. The person attains that state. That person never attains that state. Now, what is that padam? What is that state? So, this is the topic taken up in the following verses. So, we will chant the next verse from here onwards. That ultimate padam, that goal to be reached, that is going to be described. So, now let us chant the next verse, verse number 9, page number 163. Vijnana sarathiryastu manaf pragrahavan naraha sodhvanaf paramapnoti tad vishnov paramam padam. Vijnana sarathiryastu manaf pragrahavan naraha sodhvanaf paramapnoti tad vishnov paramam padam. So, yaha naraha vijnana saratihi, that person who is vijnana sarathi. Vijnana sarathi means the one having sarathi who has vijnana. That person who has a discriminating intellect as the charioteer. That person who has a discriminating intellect as a charioteer. So, such a person will be pragrahavan manaha. He will have full control over the mental reins. What happens to him? Saha adhvanaha param apnoti. Such a person, he reaches the end of the road. Adhvanaha param. Param means end. Adhvana means road. Means he reaches the end of the road, he reaches the goal. And what is that goal? Tad Vishnoho paramam padam. That is the supreme abode of Vishnu. That is the supreme abode of Vishnu. So, the one who has a discriminating intellect as the charioteer and who has total control over the mental reins, such a person will surely reach the end of the road. Such a person will surely reach the destination. And what is that destination? That destination is the supreme abode of Vishnu. So here once again you will find Shruti Mata is repeating that only a Vijnana Sarathi will be Pragrahavan. Only a person who has this right knowledge will have total control over the mind. Again and again, again and again it is reiterated. In Dhanyashtakam also Bhagavan Shankaracharya says, the first line itself is Tat jnanam prashamakaram yadindriyanam. Tat jnanam, that is knowledge. What is knowledge? That is knowledge which quietens the mind and the senses. Prashamakaram yadindriyanam. So what is the proof of knowledge? The proof of knowledge is that knowledge able to quieten the mind and the senses? This is a test of knowledge. If the knowledge is able to quieten the mind and the senses, then alone that knowledge is knowledge. So this is very important, because very many times we just study the scriptures and think we are knowledgeable. We by heart some verses and think we are knowledgeable. We take it as a scholarly, academic, we study the scriptures with academic interest, and then we think we are knowledgeable. But according to scriptures, what is the sign of knowledge? The sign of knowledge is a quietened mind, a quietened senses. The sign of knowledge is control over the mind, control over the senses. So what is the sign of knowledge? The sign of knowledge is you are able to choose your words while speaking. You are able to choose your thoughts while thinking. And you are able to choose your action while acting. So this is called control. You know what to speak, when to speak, to whom to speak, how much to speak. You know what to act, how to act, where to act. Desha, Kala, Patra, everything is known. So this is the sign of knowledge. Total control over the speech, over the mind, over the senses. Such a person is called Vijnana Sarathi, and such a person will definitely be Pragrahavan, so like a charioteer. So what is the proof that the charioteer is efficient? The proof is that horses, they just listen to the charioteer. The reins are ever in the hands of that efficient charioteer, and through the reins he efficiently controls the horses. Now this is the proof that the charioteer is efficient. So such a person, he will definitely reach the goal, and that goal is Vishnoho Paramam Padam. It is a supreme abode of Vishnu. Now, I am sure we all must have listened to Puranas. So the moment this term comes, Vishnu Padam, what is the imagination that comes to our mind? So we think, oh, that Vishnu Padam, that abode of Vishnu is nothing but Vaikuntha. And then all those descriptions that we have heard in the Puranas, those descriptions will come to our mind. Bhagavan with Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, all powerful, beautiful form. Isn't it? Served by so many attendants, so many devotees. Beautiful world where there are no miseries, there is only happiness, this, that, etc. So all those descriptions, they come to our mind. Now we have to understand what is Upanishadic definition of Vishnu Padam. According to Upanishad, what is that abode of Vishnu? This we have to understand. So that is what we are going to see in the next two verses. So let us chant these verses. Detailed discussion we will take it up for the next class. So page number 165, verse number 10. We will chant verse number 10 and 11 together. So page number 165. Indriyebhyah parahyartha arthebhyascha param manah manasastu para buddhihi buddhiratma mahan parah. Indriyebhyah parahyartha arthebhyascha param manah manasastu para buddhihi buddhiratma mahan parah. Page number 170, verse number 11. Mahatah paramam vyaktam avyaktat purushah parah purushanna param kinchit sa kashtha sa paragatihi. Mahatah paramam vyaktam avyaktat purushah parah purushanna param kinchit sa kashtha sa paragatihi. So what is described here? Arthaha indriyebhyah para. Arthaha, sense objects, they are para, higher than. Indriyebhyah, the sense organs. So sense objects are higher than the sense organs. Manah artebhyascha param. Mind is higher than the sense objects. Buddhihi manasah para. The intellect is higher than the mind. Mahanatma buddhehe paraha. Mahanatma. So here Mahanatma means Mahattattva. So Mahattattva is higher than Buddhi, intellect. And then Avyaktam Mahataf Param. Avyakta is greater than Mahattattva. Purushaha Avyaktat Paraha. And Purusha is higher than Avyakta. Purushat na param kinchita. There is nothing higher than Purusha. Sa kashtha, that is a limit, that is the highest. Sa paragatihi, that is the highest goal. So, the sense objects are higher than the sense organs. Higher than the sense object is the mind. Higher than the mind is the intellect. Higher than the intellect is the Mahattattva. Higher than the Mahattattva is Avyakta. Higher than Avyakta is Purusha. And this Purusha is the highest. This Purusha is the greatest goal to be achieved. Now what does this mean? So this is a separate topic. We will discuss in detail in the next class. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.